with a $9 trillion cumulative deficit over the next 10 years. There's no question that that's unsustainable. I don't think anybody, even Paul Krugman, who loves deficits, would acknowledge that that is an unsustainable path for U.S. fiscal policy.
Now, what did Keynes say about deficits?
Well, Keynes, if he were alive today, would say that this was excessive and unsustainable, because most of this deficit is not a Keynesian stimulus package. That was less than $1 trillion. Most of it's a structural deficit, because the United States spends much more every year, regardless of whether there's a boom or a bust, than it raises in taxation. So this can't be justified in Keynesian terms. It's a fundamental crisis of public finance, which the political class in Washington seems unable to address.
And that's the problem. They do not have the political will to do that.
It is a question of political will, because the underlying strength of the U.S. economy is almost certainly greater than that of the British economy in 1945. But public finance, and this is one of the points I try to make in The Ascent of Money, can trump your economy, even if you have a wonderful workforce, tremendous natural resources, and all the rest of it. Think of Argentina. And my worry is not only that there's a British imperial parallel, but there's also a Latin American parallel here, that the United States is in danger of evolving into a Latin American... Well, in the sense that Argentina was about the fourth richest country in the world 100 years ago, and over that 100-year period systematically blew it as a result of mismanagement of its public finances.
So the currency was worth nothing.
Well, currency after currency. How many currencies did they have? How many defaults? The United States is on an unsustainable fiscal path. And we know that that path ends in one of two ways. You either default on the debt, or you depreciate it away. You inflate it away with your currency, effectively. So we're running out of money. Reserve currency.
We run out of money because...
Well, you can end up with too much money, or rather the opposite.
Well, we run out of money because, A, because it's worthless, and the more you print, it's worthless, or you run out of money because, you know, you've got all this debt and you can't service the debt.
What you run out of is credit. Remember, the United States relies on foreigners who currently hold half the federal debt to finance its borrowing habit. If foreigners lose confidence in the U.S. as a borrower, and if they lose confidence in the dollar as a currency, then things can turn ugly quite quickly. And that seems to me to be a lesson of history.
I mean, I talk to these people as much as you do, as you know. You know, they don't seem to me that they are about to be frightened by the American economic future. I do not hear them saying, oh, my God, you know, it's over for America, so we better not, A, buy any more dollars, or B, we better not, better find alternative investments.
But these are the same people who, in late 2006 and early 2007, were telling me, and perhaps you too, that there would never be another recession in the United States, because the great moderation...
No, the Chinese who are buying the debt, they're saying, we buy the debt because it's, when we look around, it's the best place, because we still have confidence in America.
Well, that's not really what they think. It may be what they say. Two things. First of all, they're buying a lot less than they used to, where we need them to buy a lot more. In 2007, at peak, they were buying 3/4 of all the new debt issued by the U.S. Treasury. Now it's about 10%. We're issuing much, much more, and they're buying much less, because they feel that $2 trillion is about enough, really. I mean, if you look at their international reserves, which are predominantly held in dollars, they have a huge amount.
It was about $1 billion a day for a while.
It was an extraordinary amount of money that was flowing from China to the United States to finance our borrowing habit.
So we could buy their goods.
So we could buy their goods. It was vendor finance, if you like. And it worked well for a time. But I always argued that Chimerica was unstable. That's why it was called Chimerica. It was a pun on the word chimera. And I think it was a chimera, and I think it's proved to be, certainly from the vantage point of the United States, I think it served China much better than it served the United States. They have been growing their economy at 10% a year. They're on track to overtake us by 2027. And we in return have got
not per capita, but overtake us in terms of the size of the economy.
In terms of gross domestic product, not in per capita terms. That will take many, many years,
$1 billion
perhaps.
Plus population, right. All right, so you think that'll happen when? 2030?
Well, I'm only quoting Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs, whose projection was that in 2027, and I always joke on April the 14th at 2:30 in the afternoon, China's GDP would exceed that of the United States. But it's credibly in that ballpark, and that's a real historical moment. There hasn't really been a point in the last century when anybody looked like doing that. A few people thought Japan might in the glory days of the 1980s, but I think the Chinese Chinese challenge is a more credible one, not least because of the sheer size of China, but also because they do have a model that seems to deliver, even if it delivers at the expense of others. And that's why I think their currency policy is a real source of concern.
But you also argue about China, that as their economy grows, their politics have to change, and they're unlikely to change, and therefore when the game looks bad for them, they're going to turn nationalistic, and then the problems become an aggressive China.
I think this needs to be a concern as the Chinese leadership changes. The next generation of Chinese leaders, I think, will be more assertive. And they have up their sleeve this wonderful trump card. If things go wrong, and they may, I mean, let's face it, every Asian economic miracle is punctuated by at least one financial crisis. If things go wrong, they can call on a formidable popular nationalism. That's a sentiment which we know as historians can always be called upon when the going gets tough economically, which it will sooner or later for China.
But your premise is based on two things. One, the Chinese political system will not change, A, and B, the United States will not have the political will to deal with this deficit.
Yeah.
Now,
I think both of those are reasonable assumptions.
On this very same program that you're on, the director of the Office of Management and Budget says that we will take the deficit of 2009, and by 2012-13, we will have it. So by the time this president finishes his first term, we will cut the deficit in half. So that suggests some political will, if you believe him, to do it, to deal with the deficit.
It would still, therefore, be around 6% of gross domestic product.
Yeah.
Now, that is a very large deficit in any normal circumstances. So to half it from 12 or so percent of GDP to 6 doesn't constitute fiscal stabilization. You still will be borrowing around $1 trillion a year.
It constitutes progress, for God's sake.
It's progress. But my question is, where in their plans do we get to budget balance? Because it's clear from the forecast that he himself has made that the U.S. continues to run a deficit over a 10-year horizon. And if you look further beyond 10 years, because it's very important to do that, and take into account the unfunded liabilities of the Medicare and Social Security systems, the position of the United States verges on bankruptcy, because although we have a $10 trillion debt, the unfunded liabilities are $100 trillion. And that's something that it seems to me one can't lightly dismiss.
Warren Buffett, as we speak today, made a huge multi-billion-dollar, $30 to $40 billion investment in railways, saying this is my confidence in the American economy.
Well, good luck to him.
Well, he's knows something about economies and investments, doesn't he?
Oh, sure, and his track record's been very impressive until very recently, and it's been less so. I mean, it's possible
it was less so last year, but it's come back.
Right, so it's possible that he's right and I'm wrong. I don't rule that out, and that all is going to be well, and that the U.S. is going to bounce back.
Are you
just
prepared to say it's either Buffett or me in terms of analysis?
I'm happy to bet with him, though I probably can't put down quite as much money as he can in this bet. I'm a humble academic. But it does seem to me that a better bet would be to put money on not just China, but actually China's trading partners. I mean, I would rather buy Australian railroads than American railroads, because I know that stuff is being shipped from Australia to China in much larger quantities than is currently being shipped coast to coast in the United States. I mean, actually, freight traffic on U.S. railroads is at an extraordinarily low level right now, with very little sign of improvement. So he's a very optimistic man, I would say.
And you think he's making a serious mistake?
I do, because I don't really see that the United States can grow at rates rapid enough to make that investment pay, cheap though the price may be. Now, of course, it's reckless of me to take on Warren Buffett, but you know what? This is a moment in history when the things that have been true for his entire life may have ceased to be true. The biggest problem that anybody faces today is that their lifetime experience, even if the life is as long as Warren Buffett's, is no longer a reliable guide to the future. Why? Because we just missed a Great Depression by a hair's breadth, and we missed it by throwing a vast quantity of money at the U.S. economy, by running a deficit as large as we were seeing in World War II in peacetime. Nobody knows whether that will create unintended consequences that will ultimately slow the economy down. My instinct is that it will.
Okay, the question, let me just go to a little tangent real quick. Was that the wrong thing to do? To throw that money at a time that this economy needed somebody to do something dramatic? Are you suggesting that the thing